A pleasure to me all at last, and welcome to films I should have talked about years ago. More specifically, a bonus episode. I'm probably going to be doing a lot more of these now because I have probably been getting into the habit of seeing newer films. In the same way that I have done with both films I should have talked about years ago, season 1, and films I'm willing to talk about again. Both of those I've managed to talk a lot about brand new movies, but here I have been getting into a lot of those. So I'd say right now it's time that I get into as many of these as I can. Of all brand new movies that have come out here in 2022, let's talk about Lightyear. Yeah, a heavily over-marketed and over-advertised movie by Pixar that actually had fallen under a lot of contradiction and tons of controversy. So many people out there have so many disagreements with this that it's ridiculous. Disney is what Disney is. A kind, heavy-hearted, loving series of people that work very hard at what they do. They earn billions of dollars because of the huge amounts of creativity that they have to put together, and all the people had to work their fingers off just so we could see this stuff on the big screen. Or, of course, on the small screen as well, because Lightyear has sure made a killing coming to Disney+. And when I finally got the chance to watch it around the end of July 2022, that's less than 2 months ago, of course, but I really ought to say it probably would only be worth it for just one showing. Because the previous 2022 release that Pixar had made, Turning Red, actually was a million times better at what it did. And Lightyear just didn't necessarily cut it all too well in comparison. So I could almost see why people were targeting it so maliciously and with all kinds of serious intent. I could see why a lot of people are wanting to be negative about it in countless ways. Because at this point in time, it's worth noting that, as honest as I am, Lightyear has little to no connotation with what we have seen in previous lore established. What it is it's supposedly the feature-length film that Andy himself from Toy Story saw in theaters and prompted him to ask for a Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger toy for his birthday. So one could only imagine that, first of all, if this were a 1995 release, it would have never looked anything like what we had seen with this. Chances are CGI was practically zilch at the time. Because even though Toy Story came out that same exact year, it was pretty much nothing at all. CGI certainly was at its lowest by the 90s, and Pixar somehow managed to make a killing using this one technique alone. To make a movie for us to watch, I consider it a masterpiece because it's not just with the animation that they somehow were able to get it right, but also with a lot of other things. Lightyear, on the other hand, while it is targeted to people as the supposed inspiration to Andy wanting to get a Buzz Lightyear toy for himself with the plot of the first movie of Toy Story, one could only imagine what else could possibly show up. Maybe there would be a sequel to where he would find another kind of Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger toy, and maybe then he would try to ask for that for his birthday, or even another part of any occasion. So again, it's very contradicting. The fact that a 2022 release is supposedly set in the year 1995, it's one thing, but the thing is, it's meant to be a fictional science fiction Space Ranger style space cruise with a giant space colony. A space colony that does in fact land on a certain uncharted planet and gives us a bit of a reason to recite many of the famous lines that Buzz Lightyear himself had talked when he was first introduced in the first Toy Story movie at first. Of course, we know the famous lines where he mentioned a mission log. He talked about how the terrain was unstable. There seems to be no sign of intelligent life. and other such stuff. He basically recites everything that had been mentioned in the first Toy Story movie when Buzz Lightyear first appears on screen. So that, I feel, well, it might have been really effective at first. I now can see why it hardly has anything to do with Toy Story as it is. The kind of canon that had been established. Head canon, to be exact. A few other things would simply be the fact that there actually did exist a very rare, obscured animated series from 2000 called Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. In it, we get the likes of Patrick Warburton, Nicole Sullivan, Stephen Furst, Larry Miller, Neil Flynn, Adam Carolla, Wayne Knight, and lots of other unique talents for the time. They made a really good cast and managed to make a nice big success at the time, but the real thing is that Buzz Lightyear of Star Command is very obscured. The only way that you're ever able to watch it nowadays is by simply watching it on YouTube. People were somehow able to get the rights to record all of the original broadcasts that were out there on various networks. Networks that don't even exist anymore, that Disney used to provide in the year 2000. But here we are 22 years later with another supposed headcanon that acts as the inspiration for Andy himself to get an actual Space Ranger toy. So I'm really seeing a lot of shock and confusion here. Exactly how does this new piece of Buzz Lightyear material connect the stars to the events of Buzz Lightyear Star Command? How does it make sense that a 27-year-old movie supposedly has another movie that is meant to take place within the original headcanon established from 95? How does it make sense at all that Patrick Warburton is seen as the true Buzz Lightyear voice, whereas Tim Allen was nothing? More importantly, why do we have Chris Evans, the same guy who was famous for the MCU and Knives Out, as Buzz Lightyear himself? That literally makes no sense. We had gone through 3 voices, with a 4th voice being used for the Toy Story treats, as well as Kingdom Hearts, when Buzz Lightyear made his appearance in Kingdom Hearts 3. So I'm already seeing a lot of things wrong with this, but yet I have yet to explain the plot of this whole movie. Buzz Lightyear is in a space colony that ends up landing on a certain planet, and he is in fact in search of various supplies and materials. When they try to escape the planet with their lives, with a new rookie inbound. A rookie who is in fact kind of a bumbling idiot. I don't really understand why. But anyways, the space colony itself, this giant ship ends up crashing onto a cliffside, and Buzz is constantly asked if he needs help in getting the ship out of orbit, out of the planet safely. But he refuses. I mean, this was sort of the whole thing about Buzz Lightyear in general, especially with what we've seen throughout Toy Story 1. He's one of those that does not need help for anything. He'd rather do things on his own, work alone. And it's also like with what we saw in Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. It was well executed there, and the writers of that series clearly knew the movies so well. 5 years it took. But in the end, it was beyond worth it. To see them do such a great job at giving us a series that's totally worth watching even today. But here, we actually get the same kind of feeling from what the movie itself taught us. Yet here, what it does is it inflicts a major disaster. The colony crashes, and it takes a long time for it to be repaired. They establish a camp on the planet itself. They go so far as to go through years and years of rigorous testing to find some sort of specialized formula that creates the powerful crystals that are actually able to allow the colony itself to escape from the gravity of the planet itself. However, there's a huge twist to this. Every time they create these crystals, they have to send Buzz himself on a space journey to test flight with these crystals. The power that they contain should be enough to put him through hyperspeeds. Mach levels that go way beyond the likes of most common space shuttles. So, what they have to do here is they simply have to put Buzz Lightyear through a test flight where they go and escape the planet, slingshot around the sun, and then head back to the planet itself. But when they do this the first time around, they find out something very, very strange. Buzz Lightyear himself discovers that it looks a little bit different. The colony itself that they establish, the town that they have built, looks slightly different than it did when he left. You see, every time Buzz goes out there on that particular mission, to him it feels like a few minutes pass by. And every time he's successful and lands back down, he notices the big changes that are apparent. It turns out that he goes through a flow of time. It appears a lot faster to him, but that's because he's moving at hypersonic speeds. Whereas the planet itself ages 4 years. Essentially, he is traveling through time. He's going through time so fast that he hardly even ages at all. But the rest of the planet doesn't know this. At least not until the many, many, many other times that they try to do this. And every time they do so, they advance another 4 years, whereas he advances another several minutes. Every time that they go through with this mission, every time it turns out to be a failure, the crystals themselves are just not optimal enough because any of the components supposedly are not well put together. So the thing is, they keep repeating this process over and over again until finally, Buzz Lightyear makes one last run back to the planet itself, only to find his best friend has died. Her office is empty. She left behind a recording with her daughter, stating that she will no longer be able to keep a hold of her own office. Her own colleagues, her own teams have banded together to offer her a lot for her life. She has tried multiple times to get them all out there back home, but she has failed multiple times. And Buzz Lightyear himself feels the sadness. But it only gets worse from here because under new management, the teams themselves and a lot of new regulations follow. The program itself that would allow them to escape from the planet and head on back home with their large colony would actually be terminated. However, before they leave, Buzz is given a surprise. A robotic cat named Socks. And this robotic cat not only knows how to make the fuel the right way, he actually goes as far as to help Buzz infiltrate the old base where the spaceship itself is located now. The program is now shut down and the place is heavily guarded. So they need to infiltrate the place. They're able to make the formula successfully. They're able to get the crystal to be optimal enough for travel. They board a spaceship, have the crystal ready, and when they take off, they come back around and they find out that the crystal itself is optimal for flight. To get through a hypersonic speed, optimal enough to allow everybody to survive. So that way they can head on all the way back home successfully. Buzz Lightyear realizes that this could actually work, so he heads on back down, only to find that the planet once again has gone through major changes. This time, a bit of a terraformation. Plants, trees, and the like are in the way, and he himself has no idea what's going on. A mysterious figure pulls him out, and his ship ends up disappearing into nowhere after a robot touches it with some kind of device. Turns out, an unknown figure has been prowling around. And it turns out to be Buzz Lightyear's own friend. Her daughter is now fully grown. up and about and trying her best to strive through life, undercover for the most part. And that's because an evil organization led by a certain mastermind by the name of Zurg is out on the loose, prowling around the planet and in search of a certain item, the crystal itself. Because when we get further into the film, I really gotta say that the big twist here that we get to find is that Zurg himself is actually a robot powered by Buzz Lightyear himself. Oh man. It turns out Buzz Lightyear himself, while the one that we've known has been piloting around at hypersonic speeds and traveling through time on his own, which barely makes him age at all in comparison to the rest of the world that he's lived on for most of the time. It turns out that this second Buzz happens to be some kind of clone, one that has been around in the future, one that has actually lived for a long time, aged on the planet itself. First of all, how did Buzz get cloned? Second of all, why is the main antagonist a robot piloted by a clone of Buzz Lightyear himself? Though I really do admit, I really like the performance done by James Brolin, the father of Josh Brolin, who you know played back then, right? Yeah. That's pretty much that. Anyways, though, this older Buzz Lightyear needs this exact crystal to be used for a specialized mission, to go back in time and make sure that everything has been erased. So that way, nothing's in vain, and they can all live happy lives once again. They could try everything all over again. They could successfully get the space colony itself to not crash on the planet. They could probably get away with whatever materials they were looking for in the first place. They could probably ensure that nobody would die on that planet. You know what? I do feel like that sort of intent actually would have been a well-executed play done by the main antagonist. If that was really their true idea, to try and erase or alter the events that had actually happened in time itself, well, that classic cliche of trying to alter the space-time continuum for a certain use is well done, but only in specific ways. Well, you know what? Buzz Lightyear commanding a team of rookies and all that good stuff, a robotic cat, a robot piloted by a Buzz Lightyear clone who's older than the real Buzz Lightyear. I mean, what kind of confusing mess is this? I really don't know how else to put it together here, but you really got to respect the ending, that the older Buzz Lightyear is defeated, the Zurg pretty much is just out of commission, and the space colony that they're basically utilizing ends up crashing. Zurg himself is defeated, escape pods are pretty much put together well, and they successfully manage to land on the base. Buzz Lightyear himself, however, is basically set upon by his own new officer, because he did break several laws, trying to leave the planet, breaking and entering and infiltrating, all that good stuff. You know, it's like what we've seen in most other movies where there happens to be somebody who's in a lot of trouble because of something he did. It's like Spies in Disguise, or maybe even Stripes, for example. But Buzz Lightyear is let go because he did, after all, complete the mission that he was supposed to do to begin with. He also saved his own comrades, his own Space Ranger teams, from getting annihilated by Zurg and his forces. He basically saved everybody from being annihilated. So that is a resolution if I've ever saw one. Anyways, what's my scoring on this one? 6.8. In comparison to most other Pixar films, I find this one to be rather lousy. With all the controversy stemming around the LGBT bias surrounding this movie and many other newer Pixar movies, I'm not really seeing the point there. But if you actually watch the movie itself, you can sort of see why some people are driving a lot of hate into it, driving middle stakes into it and fusing them to the floor. So even though it is heavily over-marketed, lots of toys are all over the place right now. There's an entire aisle at Walmart dedicated to Lightyear. Even today, 2 months later, there's still a lot of them that are on the shelves. So it just goes to show that the movie only had so much going for it. But in a way, it does circumnavigate several things out there that most people still find interesting to this day. The combination of space adventure, exploration, time travel, hyperspeeds. Kind of like when Star Wars had the Millennium Falcon and it was able to go light speed, pretty much. So, farewell.